So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the pitfalls around speaking with another agent's clients. This is not something that comes up all the time, but it does have a way of surprising agents that had no ill intention, but one way or another had a conversation with a different agent's clients where that other agent wasn't there, that then backfired on them in unexpected ways. There's a handful of things in the Code of Ethics that we won't dive into in depth on this video, but just know there are issues in the Code of Ethics about having conversations with someone else's client. If you're having conversations with another person's client and that other agent isn't there and or did not give explicitly your permission to have this conversation, then the problem is you can find yourself in this really difficult he said, she said situation where you didn't say anything that was inappropriate, but what gets relayed by that client to their agent may be very different than what you said, and you have no way to prove it. It's them saying that you, the professional, said these things, and so now you have a mess, right? Not to mention that it can be very frustrating for the agent on the other side to say, why are you talking to my client anyway? You shouldn't be talking to my client. Some agents will be very, very aggressive in their enforcement of basically trying to say that this is a breach of the Code of Ethics on your part that you had this conversation with someone who is represented by someone else. It's had a way of creating hard feelings that results in ethics complaints that will then catch people off guard. One example is that when the other agent's client calls you directly, you didn't reach out to them, but they call you and they let you know, hey, I'm the buyer on your listing. I couldn't get my agent to answer, so I'm calling you. And so you maybe fall into that trap of wanting to be helpful, but that is absolutely a landmine situation for you, and you would want to get out of that conversation as respectfully, but as quickly as possible. So it's just, hey, I'm sorry, you're represented by another agent. It's really not something I'm supposed to be talking to you about. I'm happy to send a message to your agent that you called me, but I really need to have all the communication go through your agent. You want to find a way to just be tactful, but not get drawn into those conversations. You want to get out of those conversations as quickly as possible, because everything you say, even things you don't say, but that they said you said, can now become problematic for you if there is an ethics issue. The other thing I would say in those circumstances where you didn't initiate this contact, but you just found yourself on the phone with someone that's represented by an agent on the other side of your transaction, you want to send an email, like send some kind of message so you're creating a paper trail here to the other agent saying, just wanted to courtesy let you know, your client called me, I let them know I can't speak with them because they're represented by you and I directed them back to you, and that was the extent of our conversation. Let me know if you have any questions after you talk to them. Now, you've documented, yes, they did call me, no, I didn't say anything, and I directed them back to you. And so you're really just kind of protecting yourself from any potential claims about he said, she said situation. These are rare, and the conflicts on them are also rare. They're just really hard to get out of. So I think just kind of holding that line in the sand of you just really want to avoid having those conversations with other agents' clients, especially if you're in the transaction. But even if it's just an offering situation, like you have the listing, someone else came through for the showing, it's multiple offers, and now maybe that buyer is calling you, but they're really represented by the other person. Again, you just want to be cautious. If you know for sure they're represented, you need to exit that conversation and probably document it as a courtesy to the other person. Another scenario in a transaction that has come up a number of times is that sometimes a buyer's agent will try to send their buyer to a home inspection, for example, or some other inspection without that buyer's agent being there, which is a problem. So they might just say, hey, listing agent, can you be there to meet my buyer for the inspection? I'm okay with it if you do that. And we really discourage that because now you're sitting there for potentially hours fielding questions from a client that you don't represent and have really a difficult situation to be able to document. So we would usually say you want to avoid that. If for whatever reason it's unavoidable, you definitely want to get that agent's permission in writing. You say, hey, I don't really want to be in a situation where I'm at the property with your client and you're not there because I don't know what they're going to ask me. Really, they want to be represented. You have no obligations to them from a fiduciary duty standpoint, but their agent does. The real risk for you is that you don't know where the conversation is going to go, right? It's the unpredictability that is the real risk, which is why you don't want to have those conversations if you can help it. And again, maybe you want to set that stage that I'm not going to have, detailed conversations with them. I'm going to open up and then I'm going to go sit in my car while they're there with the home inspector. One last thing we'll say is that we've seen a number of cases where the buyer being with an agent that is not their agent, it can create a source of non-disclosure issues or future non-disclosure claims where the agent will say, well, I told them such and such was the case. If that exact thing you said isn't actually in the disclosures somewhere, a TDS, an SPQ, an AVID, then how do you prove that you said something? So you of course should have it in the disclosures regardless, but if it's not for some reason, now you have this extra layer of a problem that you said something, while you're in the property with this person who's represented, but their representation isn't there. Just again, landmine from a non-disclosure standpoint. So all that to say, keep it in mind, try to avoid being around someone else who's represented if their agent isn't there. One last scenario that you need to keep in mind with talking to someone else's client is that it's really common for a client to be unsure of the situation, whether they're a buyer or they're a seller. They're not entirely sure about what their agent is telling them or about the situation that they're in. So they're going to call their agent friend, who maybe is in a different county, different state, or whatever else it might be, and say, hey, this is what's going on for me. Like, does this sound right to you? Or what about this? Or like, what would you do if you're in this situation? They're basically looking to you for agent advice because they don't really have full confidence in their agent. And really, the code of ethics is fairly clear that you should not be doing this. So it, presents this troubled kind of situation where you don't know everything that's going on. Your advice could also very easily be viewed as legal advice. If they take your advice, has an impact on their transaction, are you acting as their attorney for free in this case and taking the responsibility of that? Not to mention stepping on the toes of another agent who is in a contractual relationship with them, especially if anything that you said implies or directly states that that agent somehow is making a mistake or doesn't know what they're doing or is just plain wrong or is unethical or anything that could be construed or received that way. Like if the client is going to hear it and then that gets relayed, now you have potentially an agent on the other side saying, hey, you shouldn't be talking to my client. This is slander. You shouldn't have said any of this stuff about me and you're interfering in my transaction. I'm gonna take you through the ringer for having even engaged in this conversation with my client, which you should have known better as a realtor. So again, these are few and far between, but you do wanna watch out for them. It is a very tenuous situation if you have a client doing that. And of course, clients do this all the time. If it's happening to you, you wanna be mindful and find, again, professional, tactful exits to those conversations as soon as you can. So with that, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you learned something or if this helped you solve a problem, follow me for more.